Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how a senior member of the Conservative campaign team may have inadvertently let the cat out of the bag that the general election is intended to take place in spring rather than autumn, as they keep trying to convince people. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I was sent a link to a video clip of Tory party chair Richard Holden yesterday in an interview with ITV. It's very interesting, and I've shared the link with the relevant time in the description below. Now, it's not conclusive, but it does indicate that Holden may believe that we are going to have a spring election, and he may have let the cat out of the bag. What do you think?
Well, obviously two very disappointing results for the party overnight. A bit of local context to both of them, though. Obviously, we'd seen in Wellingborough the MP had been faced a recall petition. And in Kingswood, obviously the previous Conservative MP had stood down just a few months before what's going to be the next general election. So,
because, so what's happening here? You've got an interview. Holden's trying to excuse the by-election losses by saying, oh, there were particularly challenging circumstances. So he first of all points to Peter Bone's naughtiness, which I agree makes a by-election particularly challenging for the defending party. So when you've had an MP who's been recalled due to really terrible behaviour, it reflects poorly on the party. The party's going to struggle, absolutely. But then he said of the other one that it was because MP Chris Skidmore had stood down. It's like, well, hang on. What is it that doesn't make a by-election challenging then? You've said having an MP recalled makes it challenging. I get that because of the negative connotations. But when an MP just steps down, I mean, there was nothing dodgy about the way Chris Skidmore stood down. He wasn't standing, he wasn't jumping before he was pushed. He wasn't under investigation for anything. He stood down as a matter of principle. So how would that have made that challenging? It wouldn't. But the point is, I'm digressing. The point is, he said that Chris Skidmore stood down just a few months before what's going to be the next general election. Those are his exact words, right? He stood down just a few months before what's going to be the next general election. Now, analysing those words, Chris Skidmore stood down at the beginning of January, by the way, in the first week of January, straight away in the new year. Holden says he stood down just a few months before the general election. So what's a few months? Now, technically a few is 3, but we all know most people use it with a fairly loose definition, right? A few could mean 3 or 4 or at a push 5. I would argue it would be very unusual for someone thinking the election was going to be 10 months after Skidmore stood down to describe that as just a few months. In fact, the use of the word just there implies not many. It's like if you say a few, it's like, but if you say just a few, you're implying it's a very small number, aren't you? And this is all very much in line with my belief that their plan is for May. Now, neither of these things I'm saying here are definite, of course. In terms of Holden's statement, it's not impossible that he just used the phrase without really thinking about it. It's not a definitive letting the cat out of the bag. I just think it's very interesting. And I can't be absolutely certain that the election will be in spring. It's just where I think they're aiming for. It's where I've put my money. As I've said recently, Isaac Leverdow, the Tories' election strategist, has been in and out of Downing Street every day recently. There is no reason for Sunak or other aides in Downing Street to need to talk to the general election chief strategist in person every single day if it's not going to be until the second half of the year. I had someone suggest to me on Twitter, oh, well, it's because it's going to be a long campaign. No, they don't need to see her every day. Not in person, keeping in touch, Downing Street aides keeping in touch with CCHQ. Sure, you got email, you got the phone. You don't need in-person meetings every day. But there is another argument. There are very clever political observers who think the signs point elsewhere. There is the argument that the Tories, who are getting no narrowing of the polls with their tax cuts, and let's imagine that they still don't when the budget is announced, they decide to go long. And I've said this before, they could go long out of panic in the hopes of some sort of miracle before the autumn. And then you say, well, when that miracle doesn't arrive, they go to the polls in much worse shape because they've simply got no more time left. A December or January election doesn't seem likely because winter would be a terrible time for them to go to the polls. I know people will say, well, they got away with it in 2019. That is because voters, or at least the important voters, were persuaded not to base their vote on their own personal circumstances. But yes, this year they will be. This year it's not going to be about Brexit or about, a Labour leader it's going to be about the cost of living. That's what it's going to be about. So although I absolutely accept that the Tories may ultimately back out of a May election, if their budget in March falls flat with the electorate, but right now they're clearly gearing up for a May election. And as party chair, with a key role in election campaigning, it's quite likely that Richard Holden is part of the inner circle of people that Sunak trusts with information about what the real plan is. And it's possible that Holden used the term just a few months without thinking. Yes, it is possible. It's possible that there is some reason why Sunak wants to meet with his election strategy chief every single day for an election that's not going to be for another 8 months. It's possible that the Tories aren't concerned about channel crossings this summer, giving Reform UK even more opportunities to gather support. That they're not concerned that running the election later puts more pressure on Tory MPs to defect to Reform UK, which would be disastrous. It's possible that they're not concerned at the prospect of the new standards controls increasing problems for supply chains. It's possible that they're prepared to take the hit on transport problems when ETIAS rolls out if they wait until late autumn. All of these things are possible. It's just that when you consider all of them together, as surely the professional Tory strategists must be doing, it just seems stunningly unlikely. It is much more likely to me that when Richard Holden described early January as just a few months before the general election, he meant it. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.